If you have ever wondered how a threat intel report actually gets made, or how raw data turns into something a CISO reads and acts on, there is actually a process behind it. It's called intelligence cycle or threat intelligence life cycle. So let me write it down here. Threat intelligence life cycle. All right. So every CTI team, whether it's a Fortune 500 SOC or a solo analyst, they runs on some version of this. I use this exact cycle every day in my job, and so let's draw it and break down each stage. So threat intelligence life cycle is not a straight line. It isn't a straight line. Then what it is? It's an infinite loop. And it consists of 5 stages, and it just keeps repeating. And this is important actually. Intelligence isn't a one-time report. Okay, it's not a one-time report, it's continuous. So let's look into that 5 stages. So these are the 5 stages, like planning and direction, collection, processing, analysis and production. Then the final one is dissemination and feedback. And as I said, like, this is a loop. All right, so let's go around the wheel. So the first stage is planning and direction. So everything starts with a question, right? Not the data. Like, you can collect the data from various sources, but for what for? So we need to define a set of questions that you can answer with the data that you collect. So the questions can be asked by the stakeholder, or maybe from CISO, or could be a client. So like, are there any threat actors that are targeting our industry right now? Or is our brand being impersonated online? Right? So these are relevant questions. Then how you get answers for this? Because you need the right data to figure it out, whether to see which are the threat actors that are targeting our industry, or maybe are there any domains out there that are impersonating our brand. So this is the stage where you define what do you need to know exactly, right? So in the industry, we call it as priority intelligence requirements, or PIRs. And why does this matter so much? Because without this step, analysts just keep collecting the data with no direction. So basically, you collect a lot of data and you prepare the reports that nobody asks for and nobody reads it. So I have seen this happen, like, teams are drowning into feeds with zero focus. So planning is basically, it is what prevents that. Now let's go to the stage 2, which is the collection stage. Now, once you know what we are looking for, we can start collecting the raw data, right? This can come from a lot of places, like OSINT, for instance, that is open source intelligence, right? Open source intelligence. So it can be social media forums, space sites, or maybe any others open source from where you can get the information. The second one is threat feeds. Again, threat feeds, there are many open source platforms that provides the threat feeds, or maybe there are paid sources. One of the open source platform is OTX, or Alien Vault. It's a very well-known platform. And there are MIS, Mandiant DTM. Mandiant DTM is now part of CTI, which is the Google Threat Intelligence. The next one is dark web. Of course, I think most of you are familiar with this word, dark web. So there are a number of marketplaces out there, leak forums, whatnot, shaming sites owned by the ransomware groups. So you can collect the information from dark web if it is required, if it's a part of your planning phase. Then comes the internal telemetry. Internal telemetry is basically like your own logs. Like if you find any threat, maybe your SOC team finds any threats in your environment, and you collect the IOCs. You can you use those IOCs, or you can feed those IOCs into your security controls, if for detection of threats, or you can use it for threat hunting. So these are the various different sources, and then there is human sources. Sorry. So then there is human sources where direct analyst to analyst, you can check with other analysts and get the information from. So these are the various different sources from where you can collect the information that you need. So one thing you have to keep in mind, that at this stage we have not filtered the data. Okay, so it's a raw data that you collected from various different sources, based on the plan that you have set in the initial stage. And the data may be raw, unverified, and sometimes even messy. Now let's move on to the third stage, which is the processing stage. So raw data is now its own is not useful, right? Raw data is messy, it is unfiltered, and it's very difficult to read and understand what exactly it is. So this is where you have to clean it up, right? The processing means basically you have to remove the duplicates, because you collect the intel from various sources, right? Like maybe from Alien Vault, IBM X-Force, or maybe from Andean DTM or SOC Radar, whichever the sources you collect from. There are chances that you collect the same information from all these sources, right? So basically you need to remove the duplicates before you move further. Otherwise you maybe end up analyzing the same information again and again. So it's important to remove the duplicates. Then translate. This is another important thing that you have to do, especially if you're collecting the information from some Russian speaking forums, or maybe something similar in the dark web. So when you if you want to extract information from these forums, you have to convert whatever in the data into a readable format, I mean in English, or something which the language that you understand. But most commonly used is English, and most of the platforms which provide this sort of data does support the translation feature. Then enrich. Of course, when you're collecting the data, when you're processing the data, it's important to know that whichever the data that you collected are supported with enough evidences. For instance, you are tracking an impersonating domain, then you should it's important to know where the domain is hosted, who is the domain registrar, is it backed by some DNS providers. So all this information that you need to know, right? So it's important to collect those information as well. So whatever the data you collect, you have to enrich it. Then the last one is structure it. So once you have all the information that you need, right, so you have to structure it into a particular format. It could maybe a JSON format, or maybe a sticks format. This is basically to if you are for instance, if you are pushing into a tip platform, if you are pushing this feed into a tip platform, basically a threat intelligence platform, you can only map the relevant feeds if your data is in a proper format, either in a JSON format or a sticks format, so that this tip platforms can understand what you have, what exactly there in the data. So that is really important. So that's where the processing comes in. One of the major part of processing is to structure the data, so that it can be used further effectively. So and you can also do the further automation with this. Even OpenCTI automatically, the tip platforms like OpenCTI automatically converts the data that you have ingested into sticks format. So that can be done with the help of a tip platform. Now let's move on to the fourth stage, which is analysis and production. So now for the actual thinking, this is a stage that separates data from intelligence. Okay, this is the exact stage where analysts start asking questions like, what does this data actually mean? So is it something relevant to the plan that we have, that we have discussed in the initial phase? So does this contain any sort of meaning information that we need? So on and so forth. And is this a real threat or just a noise? So whether the data contain some sort of information that could be used by your organization, or it poses a threat to your organization. For instance, if the data has the leaked credentials of one of your employees. So all these sort of things are really important, right? So just make sure that the data that you have extracted, it poses a real threat to your organization, or it's a noise. If it's a noise, just ignore it. If it's something meaningful, you can take it. Then it's also important to know, like, who is behind it, what's their intent, what's their capability. For instance, if you have taken the data from one of the dark web forums, or maybe the hacking forums, it's important to know, like, who is the threat actor or the data broker who has posted that data in the forum. So what's their past record, like whether they have involved in any such activities before, so on and so forth. So it help your decision making, like whether you really need to take that data or not, right? And the last question is, like, what should the organization actually do about it? It's really important, because, like, you have collected the data, you did the processing, and you did all the analysis. You should know what you're going to do with it, right? So whether sometimes you may be asked to push into a tip platform, or maybe you can create a report to based on what you have collected. Or let's say, you can, if it's an IOCs or something like that, you can push into your security controls, or maybe or SIM solutions for detection, or maybe for threat hunting, so on and so forth. So you should be very well aware about, you should know, like, what exactly you are going to do with the data that you have done the analysis. I can give one more example, like, if it's a phishing domain, you found a phishing domain which is impersonating your brand. So you can do the further analysis, like, if it is a part of the campaign, or whether it is linked to a threat actor, or maybe targeting a specific industry, so on and so forth. So once you're done with the analysis and prediction, once you get answers for all these questions, then you can move on to the next stage, which is basically the dissemination and feedback. So what happens in this stage? Basically, with all the analysis that you have done, something, let's say you have prepared a report. So you basically send this report to the people who has asked the questions in the stage one, right? Basically, it could be your stakeholders, CISO, whomever it is. So you deliver the report, then it reaches out to the stakeholder, they review it, and they can come up with further questions, or maybe they are not satisfied with what you have provided. So in any case, you have to again, it loops back to the stage one. So you have to redefine the plannings, or maybe redefine the scope, and you have to start the entire process again. So it's a loop, and that's why it's a wheel, not a line. So good CTI teams treat this feedback very seriously. If your reports aren't answering the real questions, or maybe aren't reaching to the right people in a usable format, the whole cycle breaks down at that particular stage. Even if the step 1 through step 4 were done perfectly. So that's the end of 5 stages. Let's do a quick recap. So there are 5 stages: planning, which define the question. Second one is collection, gather the raw data. Third one is processing, which basically cleans up and structure the data. And the fourth stage is analysis. It gives meaning to that data. And the final stage is dissemination, basically deliver, then loop back. And this is the backbone of every threat intelligence program, whether it's a massive enterprise SOC or a two-person team. It doesn't matter. So that's it. If you found this useful, please let me know in the comment section, and please subscribe. Please subscribe if you want to follow along. And see you in the next one. Thank you so much.